Good morning, councillors. Welcome to the meeting. We'll start with standing for the karakia.
Ko rangi, ko papa ka puta, ko rongo, ko tana mahuta, ko tangaroa, ko tuamatianga, ko hama tikitike, ko tawhirimatia, tokona te rangi ki runa, ko papa ki raro, ka puta te ira tangata, ki te whai ao, ki te ao marama, e rongo, whakareria, aki ki runa, ki tina, tina, hui e, taki e.
So welcome to the meeting. Just want to firstly acknowledge that it is nearly a year ago that the mosque attacks happened in Christchurch. I went to the Museum of Jewish Heritage in New York in January, and as you enter there, there's quite a prophetic quote from Auschwitz survivor Primo Levi, and it says, "It happened, therefore it can happen again. This is the core of what we have to say. It can happen, and it can happen everywhere." And that was something that really came home to us 15th of March last year, that it can happen everywhere. And so as part of our remembrances, it's important that they're not just about remembering a day and time, but every day remembering to be inclusive, every day remembering to value the diversity that we have in our region, and every day just trying to be kind. And if we don't know about a culture or a religion, to educate ourselves or to ask those people. A number of councillors went to the Kotahitanga Togetherness Tour event on Tuesday night, and that was one of the key premises of that event, was by sharing their stories, sharing their faith. Hopefully we can be united, and hopefully we can help stamp out the hate and prejudice that we know is everywhere, and we know that everywhere includes New Zealand. I found a lovely saying, "He ora te whakapiri, he mate te whakatakahariri." There is strength in unity, defeat in anger. And I just think back of the reaction of the Muslim community, and they responded with strength and compassion. And I think that was such a good lesson to all of us in how we need to respond to hatred and to prejudice. So I will start with apologies. I have received apologies from Her Worship the Mayor and Councillor Bowater. Do we have any other apologies or early departures? No? Okay, so move Councillor Noonan, second Councillor Courtney. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? That's carried, thank you. Confirmation of order of business. So this meeting, as per norm, is being live streamed to Council's YouTube channel. So reminder to turn your microphones on before speaking, and of course off once you've finished. We do have a new version of the annual plan consultation document in front of us with highlighted changes. So thank you to all those councillors who emailed through and sat with staff to go through proposed changes to enable us to be able to consider those today. Recommendations will be displayed on both the screens for members' reference, and amendments, of course, will be shown in red. And if you do have any amendments that you are planning to propose, please ensure that these are in writing beforehand. Other than that, there is no changes to any other items on the agenda. So are there any updates to the interest register or any conflicts of interest on today's agenda? No? Okay, thank you. We don't have any public forum presentations, so I will move to page 6 of the agenda for confirmation of minutes of the meeting held 13th of February. Do we have any corrections or comments? Otherwise, do I have a mover? Move Councillor Fulton, second Councillor Sanson. Any comments? Put the resolution. All those in favour? Aye. Against? That's carried. Thank you very much. We will now move to page 12, which is the minutes of the extraordinary meeting of the council held on the 5th of March. Do we have any queries around those minutes or amendments? Okay, do I move Councillor Sanson, second Councillor Fulton. All those in favour? Aye. Against? That's carried. Thank you very much. Okay, so we'll now move to page 15, which is the Mayor's report. I will take it as read, since I did not write it. I can't comment a lot on the content. I will, however, can add that any overseas travel is being considered, and Department of Internal Affairs are evaluating the trip at this stage, so there is no resolution other than to receive the Mayor's report. And so in light of the fact that it's very much up in the air, there is no decision being asked for at this stage, and whether the trip is going ahead or not, we actually can't say at this stage. As you're aware, Ministers Twyford and O'Connor visited our region this week. It was really a visit to listen to key industry and key businesses to just get a better feel for what the impacts of coronavirus are on them. I think that was a wonderful opportunity for our key industries to be able to firsthand let the government know what impacts that they see coming, what impacts are currently feeling. Shortage of staff was raised by them, and we know that forestry and tourism are already feeling impacts. So the government, of course, has released some news of some packages were announced earlier this week. So exactly how they're done, of course, I can't comment on, but I know that our industry partners in the region did appreciate being able to talk to the ministers directly from their perspective. Okay, I will go to questions, but knowing that if it is a question on anything the Mayor has written, I can't quite answer it necessarily. Councillor Noonan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I appreciated the pun, up in the air. I don't think you even noticed, but very good. My question relates to the travel, the international travel. I believe our training and travel budget doesn't allow us to travel overseas, so I imagine a resolution will need to be brought because it sits outside our delegations. So it's not a question for you, it's probably a question for a staff member.
Yes, I'll get...
She hasn't got a microphone.
Mrs. Birch to be able to answer, thank you.
Through you, Madam Chair, thank you. The Med is able to travel internationally, but it requires a council resolution for approval.
Okay, thanks for that clarification. And that will be coming at some point in the future.
If indeed the trip is to happen.
Thanks.
Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments? Okay, no, so there is a resolution to receive the report. Move Councillor O'Neill-Stevens, seconded Councillor Rainey. All those in favour? Aye. Against? That's carried. Thank you. Okay, so now we're moving to page 17, which is the adoption of the consultation document and supporting information for the 2020-2021 annual plan. As I noted earlier, we do have a document in front of us which has got key changes and some minor changes. So Nikki MacDonald, Mark Tregurth and Nikki Harrison will be able to speak both to the document and the financials as well as the changes within the document. I think one of the key things to remember with an annual plan consultation document is that it is a document of variations from the third year of the long-term plan. So it doesn't set out our work program. Our work program for the 2020-2021 financial year is set out in the long-term plan, and this document is just about any variations to that. But I will hand over to the staff. But I will also note that we probably are quite aware, as I was saying earlier, coronavirus, we don't know what other impacts there may be, and we may need to review some of the numbers within our annual plan as more information comes to light, and that will happen as part of the deliberation stages and final considerations on the annual plan in May. And of course, we will also have the community submissions to consider and work through as well. Thank you.
Good morning, Deputy Mayor and councillors. I'll take the report as read and just run through some of the key changes that in the document with the yellow highlighting. There's just about 12 of those sort of larger ones which I think are just worthwhile covering with yourselves. So you'll be flicking between the two documents, but I think if we just sort of go through them one by one, and we'll get through them reasonably quickly. So on page 36 of your main agenda, in the section which is since the climate emergency declaration Council has, and there's a list of bullet points there. This on page 16 of the highlighted document. That's the equivalent page for this change. That second bullet point regarding the climate, Nelson Tasman Climate Charter and the forum, we've just reworded that slightly and also talked about, how well the event was run. So that's sort of one change just to note there. The second change, which is page 37 of your main agenda, the last bullet point at the top of the page, which talks about electric vehicles, we've added a new bullet point just above that, and that's regarding reviewing the emissions trading scheme, looking for opportunities, and earning carbon credits for our own forestry and reserves. Yeah. The next one is page 38 of your agenda, where we've talked about good leadership in the whole of community. The equivalent page in the highlighted document is page 18. And in that good leadership paragraph, you'll see in the yellow highlighting that we've talked about our relationship with the Te Tuihu iwi as far as leadership is concerned for climate change. Page 39 of the agenda, so there's no wording in here for this at this stage, but what we are doing is we're looking at obtaining information on the number of trees which Council was planning to plant over the 2021 year, and if that information is relevant and useful for the public, we'll include that information as a point there. Next page is page 40 of the main agenda. And the yellow highlighted text there, which is on page 20 of the highlighted document. We've just extended the information about the activation in the city centre, so just a little bit more information for the public there. page 41 of the main agenda and page 21 of the additional document, we've just swapped two paragraphs around. So there's two paragraphs there which are highlighted, and we've just swapped those around, and it just sort of helped make it flow a little bit better. So we're getting through this reasonably quickly. Going through to the transport sector, so page 45 of the main agenda, page 20, and if I'm going too fast, just tell me to slow down, page 24 of the supplementary document. You'll see in the supplementary document some highlighted text under Toitoi Street, Seafood Terrace and that park. We've just included a little bit more information about those projects just to bring the language for the transport sector in line with the other activities that we've covered in the changes for those activities. Page 49 of the main agenda. And page 28 of the supplementary document. We've just reworded the information on the waste disposal levy just to try and make it a little bit clearer to the public, because it is quite complicated about the amount of money that is used to run the regional landfill budget and about the $10 levy per tonne that council collects.
I'm going to ask you to repeat that. I got lost somewhere, and the minute you get lost, you're in trouble.
Yeah, no. So it's page 51. Oh, sorry, I've gone too far. Page 49 of the main agenda. Page 29 or 28 and 29 of the supplementary document. And all we've done is we've added a few extra words and we've reshuffled a couple of the sentences just to try and make the complexity of the $10 levy per tonne a little bit clearer to the public. I guess people would need to be particularly interested in that to actually sort of dive down in that information. Page 53 of the main agenda. And page 32 of the supplementary document. So this is a larger piece of information here. We've added information on the refinery building just to, we had already had information on the Stoke Memorial Hall, but we didn't have information on the update on the refinery building. So we've included that information in the document there. We've only got a few more to go. Oh, certainly. Yeah. Okay. Change number 10, which is, won't be a second, page 54 of the main agenda, 33 of the supplementary document. Once again, this is to do with the Sea Sports building. Once again, quite a complicated project. We've just reworded that paragraph just to try and make the information clearer about exactly what's happening with that project, because that's a multi-year project and the budgets have been spent in some years and not spent in other years. So this information, we just sort of use the feedback just to make that a bit clearer. Just two more to go. Page 55 of the main agenda and 34 of the supplementary document. And there's nothing on page 55 because what we've done is we've added Kawata Park as a whole new paragraph in the document. So once again, perhaps a minute or two just to read through what we've written there. So those are the main changes, and of course if these are accepted by council, then we will need to amend the resolution to say that the consultation document as amended is adopted by council. Yeah.
Thank you very much for going through those changes. So I'm just going to give councillors a couple of minutes to just look through the document and just get their bearings on the proposed changes, but then we are going to go through basically section at a time. I'm not going to do word for word, we're not wordsmithing. If you've got any minor grammatical changes, there is a proposed resolution for the Mayor, Deputy Mayor and Chief Executive be delegated to approve any minor amendments. I want to make sure we're talking about the substantive discussions and remembering this is a document going out for public feedback. But I'll just give everyone just a few minutes and then I'll go in order through the document. Okay, so there seems to be a bit of discussion, so I'm going to assume that means we've finished reading. So I'm going to go through the tabled version, and I am going to skip, the pro forma pages, like contents pages, and go straight to, so when I talk page numbers, I am talking page numbers of the highlighted document. So start with page 5. So you'll see that we moved this up front from the original, what was in the agenda. So anyone have any questions or concerns on that page? Councillor Noonan?
The comment about the process, because as we go through, I've written all my questions on the other document, so I'm going to have to find both.
But the pages are in the same order, so you can just turn
as long as we go slow enough for us to get both up, that's cool.
Yep, I'm doing that myself. Right, any questions on page 5?
I do have a question. Why has it been moved? I think it's good, but why the move of that page?
Through the chair, it was a very good suggestion that came through from the Mayor and Deputy Mayor that the relationship and our partnership with iwi was being sort of hidden sort of halfway through the document, that it was a natural flow for it to follow the Mayor's introduction more forward.
Okay, great, thank you.
Okay, so the 4 priorities are the priorities as stated in the long-term plan, so we aren't in a position to relitigate that. So we will move to page 10 of the new agenda, page 31 of the previous one.
Madam Chair, can I just make a comment, if I could, about your comment that you just made, that we have the 4 priorities, and this is just a comment, but looking through the document, on page 7 we have a mission. On page 8 we have 4 priorities. On page 9 we have 3 areas of council focus. And on page 14, under the long-term plan, we have 8 community outcomes. I think the public need to be given an opportunity to be very clear about those group of missions and outcomes and foci, is that right? So perhaps just some thought should be given to some narrative about what the different things are and place them into context. I'm sure you thought about that before. Thank you.
Through the chair, so on page 14 of the main document, we do have a diagram showing how it all on the page basically. For those, we find that not a lot of members of the public actually engage at this high level of visioning. Most members of the public are more interested in the projects, but those that are interested in this, we have some interesting discussions about the wording and how it actually all fits together. So there's that supplementary way of engaging with the community on this.
Comment. That's great, and I think that visualisation, but if it's buried in page 14 in this document, you're probably right, people won't engage with it, whereas I think that actually, for a lot of members of the public, that's a really interesting group that you've done as a visual thing. Perhaps that could even go out in our comms stuff to the public as well. Just a suggestion. Thank you.
Yeah, I think the visual representation of it is going to be the key. Thank you, Councillor Fulton.
I actually find page 14 incredibly helpful. Why isn't it coming after iwi and council partnership? Why is page 14 not page 6?
We can move it through the chairs, we can move it forward.
I just wonder if that would be helpful in terms of setting the context of the pages that follow.
Yeah.
It's almost like an index to me. Yeah. Okay.
Madam Chair, I support both councillors' remarks there because it contains our vision. We put a lot of time into that, if you recall. And then this year, the start of this training, we had 4 more focus points, very important ones. So I think it's essential that they lead this plan, so to speak.
Okay, is there general agreement? I'll just take my noddings of heads. Fantastic. Okay, so we're on page 10 of the new document 31. Any questions on that page? Okay, thank you. Page 11 and 12
Yeah,
of the new, 32 and 33 of the existing. Councillor Fulton.
So apologies, my email was quite late last night, but I would like, as we're viewing sustainable transport culture, housing and the Maitai River precinct through a climate lens, I sent an email last night. I would like the housing intensification and affordability to include a paragraph looking at sustainability around building materials and amenity values in terms of improving our green spaces. I can read my email out quickly. If I can pull it up. So I'd like possibly just a couple of more words added and quite happy that that can be amended later. So looking at sustainability with respect to demolition, choice of building materials and amenity values, including increasing green urban spaces through our Nelson plan and new vegetation asset management plan.
Through the chair, there's just a few things in there to unpick. First, I'd just say there's not a vegetation asset management plan. There's a vegetation management plan, which is
Right.
it has a sort of a functional role. It's a tool for staff just when they're interacting with members of the public who may want trees removed or to do with plantings on road reserve. So it's just a tool that's been in the works for some time. I think that Mr. Laverdis was going to speak to your point around reusing building materials and the decreasing landfill volume.
Thank you, through the chair. That's following on the question that was raised with me this morning. I can confirm that the joint Nelson Tasman Waste Minimisation and Management Plan does have specific goals listed in that plan with respect to the construction and demolition materials, specifically under Goal 2 to improve the efficiency of resource use. Item 4.2.3 specifically lists that the councils will work with commercial operators to look at how we recycle construction and demolition materials. There's a further statement under item 4.2.6 that we will investigate and support the development of markets for reuse or recycling of recovered construction and demolition materials. So while there's not a policy, there is certainly something in a joint document that commits council to doing that, and I can confirm that that's in our work program, and we are working very closely with TDC to fulfill the requirements of those two goals in the Joint Waste Minimisation Plan. So it's already in our work list and it's already an approved document.
So Councillor Fulton, if you are wanting something added, perhaps it is reference to the Joint Waste Management and Minimisation Plan. Okay, thank you. Any other questions on page 1112 of the new 3233 of the old? Okay, I will move on.
Yeah, I had, sorry, one more question with the Maitai River precinct again.
Sorry, that's the one I'm just going to now.
Oh, sorry, okay.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
can I just go back to the housing one, sorry, through the chair. To be clear, so there's an element around demolition, but because it obviously talks about comprehensive redevelopment within this, but what, in terms of looking at sustainable building into the future, can we include a sentence around that and looking at how we green our city whilst intensifying? So there's three separate, there's a point around demolition, there's a point around sustainable building materials, as we know 20% of greenhouse gases are from building, construction, and then there's around how we green our urban spaces whilst intensifying. I think that those 3 points need to be included as part of our housing intensification planning if we're doing it through a carbon lens.
Through the chair, so what we're trying to reflect in the document is what council has agreed so far. So these are things that may certainly and quite likely to come out in future. We don't have anything that we can refer to in the document at the moment in terms of decisions that council's taken. So the decision council made was to have a priority which was around housing and intensification, and we've tried to describe what's happening at the moment with that.
Well, my recollection of that planning day was around housing intensification, sustainable housing intensification, because we had the climate lens over all three. So that's if you have a climate lens over all three, you're not intensifying business as usual, you're intensifying with a sustainability lens over it.
Just through the chair, a couple of the questions referred to things like the planning day and workshops, but of course we don't take direction from those. Those are not decision-making forums. Sorry.
I think also perhaps some of that's going to come through in the development of the AMPs, and that will then feed through for the long-term plan. Okay, Councillor Brand.
Thank you, through the chair. Just a really simple clarification. On page 33 of the original, which is page 12 of the additional, you just highlighted that the change of the community value of the community housing has gone from 8.32 million to 8.38. I just want to know what the difference came about.
Through the chair, that was just a correction. The number has never changed, but it was wrong in the document. It was just something that was picked up when we did our checking.
Councillor O'Neill-Stevens.
Yes, just on page 12 still, final line around housing solutions. Mark, I think you've been passed some slightly more specific wording around that. Being sure to specify we're talking about social housing supply and affordable housing choice when we discuss housing solutions.
Yeah, So through the chair, yes, so we've taken that suggestion into account, and we're just changing the wording to support partners who have the ability to deliver social and affordable housing solutions for the community.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Courtney, did you? No.
I didn't have a question.
Oh, okay, sorry, Councillor Lowry.
Thanks, I'm on page 13. Are we on there yet?
Well, I would hope to be. Okay, was there anything else on housing? Okay, great, now we're there. Thank you.
Thank you. So I just, my eyebrows raised when I read the term an imagination playground. And I'm not sure what an imagination playground is, and I don't think many Nelson residents will be aware of what an imagination playground is either. So I suggest either we clarify what that means, or we take the word imagination out. So, I mean, could someone explain what an imagination playground is, perhaps through the chair?
I can answer that.
So, if I may, through the chair, the Imagination Playground is a small area at the northern end of that site, which is going to be fenced off for younger children, and it has a series of large foam sort of blocks that they can play with and use their imagination to create things.
Oh, sorry. It sounds like a playground.
Okay, so it seems to be a term, so we probably won't debate the wording around that, because it is a concept.
People will not know what it means, and it may also incur mirth, which is not necessarily a bad thing.
Okay, so we are now on page...
Sorry, my toe was pressing too. Sorry, I have a question around that. In terms of the development, future development down there, again, we've had a workshop on it prior to the new term, but the intention is that, again, through a climate lens, that this area is developed sustainably with a high amenity value building, and that's not touched at all within that section in terms of what we're aiming for. Is there a reason why, Nikki?
Through the chair, yes, there's been a lot of workshop time with elected members, but also with the community, and there have been a lot of ideas and aspirations that have come out of that. We haven't tried to capture all of that possibility in this document because council's directed us to go away and do another piece of work, which we're underway now. So that will come out of that. It'll come back to council and you'll make some decisions about those items, and that will be the time when we can go out to the community with it.
Yeah, so some of the sections in here are really set up where we are going to be making decisions, but we haven't made decisions on them, and they'll come through as public consultations or come through in AMPs or come through in the long-term plan. So having those three priority areas, it's just really outlining them, but we haven't set any work streams or haven't approved any work around them for this AP other than what's stated. I think that's...
So I guess I am a little concerned, because when I thought we set these three work streams as a priority of this new council in terms of the next 3 years, the intention was it was through a climate lens, and we highlight that at the start, yet we haven't referred to that within the Maitai River precinct or within housing at all. So that lens is not reflected in either, and I would like it to be reflected, because I think it's important that the community understands that the reason why these projects are important to us, that we want intensification to support modal shift, but we want intensification which is sustainable as well. Likewise with the River Precinct, we're supporting that project because we see it as key in terms of a sustainable future, and I guess I just don't feel like that's been reflected in those two sections. It's reflected really well in the modal shift, because that's why we're doing it, obviously. Well, one of the reasons. So,
through the chair, yes, so the work that we're going away to do, that council's asked us to do, will absolutely take all of that into account, because we are looking at it through a climate change lens. At this point, what we can say to the community is what we've said in there, that We will develop options in this area, including improved resilience for this area to the impact of climate change, so that's in there. The rest will come once you've had a chance to consider the work we've done.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm sorry to labour this point, and you're going to think I'm being very pedantic, but it's about a principle that I think is important, which is that when we put documents like this out to the public, we use plain English, and so people understand what we're talking about. And when we're not using plain English, we indicate that is what we're doing. So I'm just wondering, because an imagination playground could be a place where you sit and imagine there's a playground, which isn't actually there, but it is if you imagine it. So I don't think things like that should be in our consultation documents. So I would like to ask, with respect, that we put imagination playground in inverted commas. Is that all right? And like I say, a small thing, big principle that I think is important. Everyone okay with that? Yeah. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you everyone. Sorry, I'm just going to refer to the CEO.
So I just wanted to address Councillor Fulton's concerns. Can I just provide assurance that the activity management plans we're working on at the moment, one of the things that's making that a completely different job from 3 years ago is the climate change lens, how we mitigate climate change and how we adapt to it. And there's a standing comment now at SLT that we won't be demolishing the Med Foods building, we'll be dismantling that building. And yes, we have every intention of coming up with some designs that are, what were your words, exemplary, innovative, and a high Green Star rating. But we're doing a business case, and it may be that the council decides, wow, yeah, we can't afford exemplary, innovative, and a Green Star rating, and we might need to change our minds. And I don't want to find we put words in here that make it difficult for the council to change its mind. But certainly that's what we are envisaging, that this will be a showcase of what you can do.
Okay, thank you. That is a nice segue. We are now on the climate change section, page 36 in the old agenda, 16 on the new. We will do the 4 pages, the entire section. We've seen the changes in the new section, as well as the comment about number of trees from Mr. Tregitha earlier. There is also our, if I get the name right, Green Building Council membership. Have I got that name correct? Yes, good. So any questions on that section, climate change?
I missed with all that was going on. I had a question on the Maitai River precinct in the Alma Turner Library. I apologise. My note said, have we got a budget for that dismantling? Now we're going to call it a dismantling. Have we got a budget for that? That is a very big, solid building.
I think Mr. Ball might answer that.
Thank you, through the chair. To answer the councillor's question, we're going to fund the that dismantling from the budget for the Turner Library redevelopment. Although the business case for that is still to be produced, by and large the scenarios that have been contemplated involve the removal of that building. So we take it from the capex for that redevelopment.
And I understand if we don't build again, that it becomes OPEX.
So through the chair, not necessarily, it depends what you do with that site. If it actually, so we will obviously, if we don't end up using that site for the library, it will have to be funded from elsewhere. But I mean, if we end up building a car park there or something else, it depends what you end up ultimately doing with that site. But at this point in time, that is the library site, and so it was always part of the project.
And so is there a time, because we've talked in the past about demolishing that building, but we were cautioned that, you know, it's better if we're demolishing or dismantling and putting a new build in there at the same time. So we have been delaying it for that purpose, I understand. Is there a time frame whereby something needs to go there?
Not specifically. There's no, I mean, the intention is to have a clear site for the redevelopment of the library. I mean, there's no hard and fast rules around the timing of or the linkage.
Okay, so what concerns me is that, it might be $500,000 to demolish or dismantle that building. That's going to come out of the library budget. So I just think we need to have a really good think about that. I mean, it's going to impact further down the line if we dismantle in the Greenway. We had a workshop on that not long after we started discussing where we were going to go with the library, and the costs of that are hugely different from what we used to do. So, as the Chief Executive said, we'll be getting a business case, but I would say prepare yourselves.
Okay, thank you. We are on, what section are you on?
But just a quick comment on that particular issue. In terms of the dismantling of the building, I'm aware that part of the building that's on the Halifax Street end, the concrete slab there'll be adaptive reuse of that concrete slab for the basketball court. So indeed, it's going to be reused, continue to be used. So
Thank you. Climate change section, page 36 and 16. So we're doing the 4 pages, the whole section. You've seen the amendments. Are there any questions at all on that section? Councillor Fulton.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Edgar. You touched on my comment, you said that you're going to look at how many trees we're planting as an additional bullet point. Can you just...
Through the chair, we could put that in, but what I'd like to point out is that in fact the purpose of those plantings were not for climate change. Like for the big one where we got funding from MPI, it was for land management, and I think it might be a bit misleading for the public because it suggests we're doing it because of the climate declaration, whereas in fact that was work already in train for other reasons.
I think I understand what you're saying, but I think that there's a general movement that planting trees address sedimentation, erosion, reforestation, and mitigate the greenhouse gas emissions. So I think it's sort of that a blank, like you could certainly say that these trees are achieving these other aims, but I think it's important that as a council we know how important it is to plant trees as a first step, and that's something we can be doing within our existing budgets. It doesn't require more budgets. It's something we've been pushing for 6 to 9 years, perhaps not through that climate lens, but nonetheless it's a great piece of work that we're doing and highlighting that. If someone's just reading the climate change section, if a member of the community isn't reading the entire document, then I think they'd be surprised that a council's not planting trees.
So can I just clarify, are there any changes to the work program around tree planting? Okay. So we need to just be mindful this is a document of variations.
Yeah.
And so anything that is work as usual, so unless we were significantly increasing this year, whereupon it should go in the report, but if there isn't any changes, we can't reiterate work as usual because that's within the existing LTP and the existing AMPs.
I think there has been changes in the past year, Nikki, like the erosion, so the Billion Trees Fund for the next year, and also Alec Levertis has got 50,000 in for vegetation strategy. So we are getting indication that more trees are being planted. Alec, didn't you say that you got 50,000 for vegetation as part of your roading transport corridors?
Through the chair, I can't recall specifically saying that. Maybe Margaret Parfitt can rack my brains, but I certainly don't think I said that, no.
Thank you, Councillor Skinner.
I'm just going to comment, we've got a big day ahead of us and I don't want to be delving down to how many trees. There's more ways of skinning a cat or adding to the climate changes we're trying to achieve than just trees. That's growing crops, food, grass, putting in timber fencing and to lock up the... But I'm not here to talk about how many trees and where and why, and we're not part of that billion tree movement.
It is within our existing AMP, so councillor Noonan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just regarding I'm just looking at what's going to come through to the public and regarding to the climate change allocation of funding that was given, and I would like to see in the consultation document some detail, a little bit more detail about where that funding has gone. There's a few people asking exactly where has that money gone. There haven't been a lot of deductions, but I think it would be helpful to have it in the consultation document to show what has been done and where we're going to. Is that something that we could do?
The Chair, on page 18, where it talks about spending, is that what you're wanting?
Thank you, because we just got this morning. So is that's all the money that's been spent are the two items with dollars, and I'm just skimming it because we've just got it. So we've spent
Councillor Noonan is talking about
182.5.
spending for this financial year, not next financial year.
Set what we have done. So so people are looking at the 500,000 that was given, and they'd like to know where the spending has gone to date.
Through the Chair, yes, I see now, sorry. So this document really focuses on the next year's spending, and we would explain what we've done in the annual report, which will be coming to you in not very long, in a few months.
Although we've got what we've done since the climate change emergency declaration council has, so it could actually sort of go in there, I think. It would save us having to answer the questions all the time.
Sorry to be belabouring this, Madam Chair, but so you're suggesting you want the funding split out from that first bullet on what we've spent out of that split into...
So I'm going to the consultation document, which most people will get.
Yes.
They're not going to, very few are going to ask for what we're looking at today.
So, sorry, we are looking at the consultation document. You've got two versions. One's a design one.
Okay, so this is the one that, okay, well, it's probably the same.
It is the same,
Time
yes.
to look at. So the heading is, since the climate emergency declaration council has.
All right, so yes, okay, we can add what we spent this current
That would be
financial
really
year.
helpful. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, councillor Laurie.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I actually concur with Councillor Fulton about us having a climate change section of our annual plan and no actual acknowledgement of what we're doing with trees. And I don't know why we wouldn't just include a brief paragraph so that people understand how we plant trees as a council. I think, climate change, trees, they go together. You have to put them together. So I'm just wondering whether there would be any interest in a paragraph that says basically planting trees is an effective strategy for fighting climate change. Council plants thousands of trees, I imagine, every year through its work operations and then we list the things that we do where we plant trees. I don't think we need to necessarily in this document to break down how many trees we're necessarily planting compared to last year, but I think not having something in the climate change section of the annual plan about trees would be very unusual. And I think people when they go to this document, they will want to see some recognition of the fact that we're planting trees.
Okay, I'm going to put a question to the council, and I'd just like a general show of hands. It's not a vote. Who thinks there should be a sentence in that section about our tree planting and are happy to consider it as part of the minor amendments to be signed off by the Mayor, Deputy Mayor and Chief Executive?
For a paragraph? A small paragraph.
Madam Chair, what about the forestry that we take out? I mean, how's it going to...
Well, that's why I'm just asking if councillors would like a sentence
A lot worse than we...
or something in there about trees.
It's an acknowledgement of the fact that council does plant trees and that trees, are a good thing when you're trying to combat climate change, and that we should acknowledge that in our section on climate change.
Okay, what I'm going to do is put that question on hold because it appears we do get some funding from 1 million trees, or we may be, and so there may be some something around that we could add. So what we'll do is we'll come back to that after the break. I'm not calling for a break now. I am going to move off discussion of trees. If anyone mentions trees right now, I'm going to cut them off. Any other questions on the climate change section? Because it's going to be a very long day. We're on page 20.
I would also like within that section, just a bullet point highlighting, so probably since the climate emergency declaration, council has, I would like it to say prioritised modal shift, housing intensification in the Maitai precinct as priorities through a climate lens, because we don't refer back to those, and modal shift is a key part of addressing climate change as well, and as is housing, as is the Riverside precinct. So I just think that we need to reference back to those first 3 points within this section. Just needs one line referencing back to those sections. Because otherwise we're silent on transport and housing within our climate change section.
Can we park that as well? I think that's a sticking point.
Okay, so this is the trick. Okay, so I'm now going to have my turn. So ideally, this level of discussion rather than questions should have come through a lot earlier, because we are going to be here for several days. I'm not going to be here for several days. Words were requested to come through earlier, and I know that sounds dictatorial or whatever, but I just fear wordsmithing a document on the fly in the middle of a meeting is not a healthy way to do it, and I'm very concerned that we're doing that. I'm not saying the points raised don't have validity. I'm just saying we had asked for a process to enable us to do this in a good and constructive way, so it could have come through as track changes. So I'm going to park that one as well, and I'm going to move through the document, and we will come back to that. So I am now moving to city centre development, page 20 of the old, page 20 of the new, page 40 of the old. Questions? Any councillors? I see no hands. I am going to move to the next section. No one's moving backwards on me. Okay, lifting council performance, page 41 of the old, 21 of the new, and of course over the page. Councillor McGurk.
Yeah, thank you, and through you, Madam Chair. Just wondering, in terms of the living wage, the council making provision to support this initiative. I'm just wondering, should we make reference to a review of the procurement policy? I know that's normal work in progress, but it's just signalling that that's the appropriate add-on, to deal with it when you're talking about dealing with contracts, review of the procurement policy.
Yes, and that is going to be happening within this financial year. Okay, thank you. Anything else on lifting council performance? Okay, thank you. I'm moving on to the variations to the 2020-2021 work programme, page 44 of your old, page 23 of the new. So we will take the first page, page 23. We're not doing transportation yet, so just the first page. Any questions there at all? Okay, thank you. The transportation section, page 24, page 45 of your old. Any questions on the transportation section? Fantastic, thank you for the addition of the wording. I think that helps set the context. Water supply, we're just following on now. Any questions on water supply? Councillor Skinner.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And it's just a general question on each of those, transport, water supply, etc., and our general infrastructure spend. I see we've reduced our capital spend for these various things. And I understand that because it puts us in a better space to complete those projects. But a lot of that spend, is it just being deferred, or are we not achieving as much as we were hoping from the previous, what was in the annual plan, what we were going to do, we've reduced from that, are we going to be achieving less?
So through the chair, no, we don't believe that we are going to be achieving less. What we've signalled in the annual plan is that there's a rephasing of work that has been required as a result of numerous things, as alluded to in these words. So easements, resource consents, and we've had to just reprioritise, but we don't believe that we'll be spending any less. We still got a significant amount of capital works that are going to be spent next year.
Okay, and think just to follow on that, does that mean we'll be doing a little bit of catch-up to rephasing? Understand certain projects are rephased and you have to keep doing it as you go along, but are we going to be having to do a little bit of a catch-up down the track and it will hit us a bit harder in expenditure later on?
I think through the chair again, that's something that we need to discuss through the workshops, and that's something that we have been discussing in the several workshops that we've been holding on transport and the three waters. But in terms of the prioritisation, in terms of what you see now, that there's still a commitment to actually spending the money on those projects. It's just a different phasing.
Thank you for that. I'm just thank you for the answers. I understand from workshops rephasing. I'm just a little bit concerned that I know we've made some cuts, which is great to make some cuts in expenditure for this annual plan, but my concerns, which I'll raise later on, is that we may be making cuts in some of our core infrastructure, stuff that we'd already planned to spend and we're not able to spend now. And is it just going to accumulate? I'll ask the CEO. Just need a little bit of assurance.
So I'm reasonably well briefed on this because we had an identical conversation with the Mayor last night. And some of the projects that are being pushed out are because we haven't got either landowner consent or resource consent. And one of the things we need to be doing smarter in the long-term plan is identifying those projects that have those sorts of risks and making sure we now allow enough years to get those sorts of things before the big chunk of money arrives to actually build it. And what we will be doing is looking for smaller, more straightforward projects to bring forward to fill those gaps, so that we don't have this deferral to the same extent. And my expectation is that as we, there's a whole delivery process around capital projects. It's not just writing a contract document and putting it out to tender. Before then, my activity managers have to put those into their plans. They have to do business cases. They have to write a brief. The job has to be very well defined before we start that process. And some parts of our delivery chain are still not up to speed, which is why in the previous section we're talking about lifting council performance. Some areas are doing a lot better. The infrastructure team have had the benefit of more resources and are starting to hit their straps. Others aren't quite so fortunate. So I would say that in actual fact I've got least risk in the infrastructure area, and it's other areas that we've already discussed in the workshop that are of more concern.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions on wastewater? Stormwater? Flood protection? Councillor Noonan.
Thank you, and I did send this question through. I'm just wondering what at the very beginning, we've got 1.7 million that's reduced, probably because of rephasing as well, but what OPEX impact does that have?
Through the chair, very small, because I think it's only about 60,000 of interest or something like that, and that's really because there's no depreciation, because it's actually just rephasing of a project that is still work in progress.
Thank you.
Okay, anything else on flood protection? Thank you. Solid waste? Environment? And that includes the Nelson plan as well. Yes.
Sorry, not a question, through the chair. I've just got a correction on the Nelson plan. We talk about loan funding 1.122, and that's the correct amount. I've noticed that it's incorrect on page 35 in the financial prudence section. So the correct number that we're loan funding is 1.122.
Thank you, so noted. Councillor Courtney.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. Through to Nikki or Mr Tregurtha. Is it normal for us to loan fund something like an annual plan or not an annual plan, I mean a Nelson plan? I know the importance of it. I know we're bringing many plans together in this, and it's a good piece of work, but up until now we've charged it as operational. Is that correct? And for how long have we done that?
So through the chair, when you ask if it's normal to, so the Nelson plan started off as a reasonably small project, and it has been operationally funded because it's reasonably consistent over the last few years. There'll be a report coming to council, but basically there's some quite big costs over the next 2 or 3 years, and so we've spoken to audit about loan funding it in the same way that we do loan fund other capital grants and other sort of large sort of one-off expenditure that is more capital in nature. So the Nelson plan has a life of at least 15 years, probably 10 to 15 years, and so it is actually, it does benefit, it has a future flow of benefit to the whole community. So it's sort of unfair to kind of penalise the current ratepayers for those large chunky expenditure. So what we're doing is we're effectively loan funding OPEX, and I've got in our long-term plan, I've got copies of it. We contemplate that that's the sort of thing we do, and it's been signed off by audit as well.
Follow up to that, Madam Deputy Mayor. We've never done it with the long-term plan. I mean, that's a 10-year document. You say this is a 10 or 15-year document, this Nelson plan. Why haven't we given that same consideration to the Nelson, the long-term plan? Funding it through.
So the production of the long-term plan's minimal costs of producing it. It's minimal external costs, that's for sure. So the long-term plan isn't actually a large planning document really in the scheme of things compared to what we do every other year as well.
Just
so a lot of work.
Yeah, a final question. Have we ever done anything like this before?
So through the chair, yes, we're loan funding the Waimea Dam. We've loan funded desludging. So we desludged the Nelson North wastewater ponds a few years ago, and that was a large, very concentrated piece of expenditure, and we loan funded that.
Thank you. Councillor Fulton.
Thank you, through the chair. I just have a question with regard to CBD enhancements, the additional, 50,000 of operational expenditure is proposed to be added to the CBD enhancement budget. Is that relating to the city centre spatial plan, which is the first bullet point on page 29? Or is that something different? Can I just clarify what we mean there?
Through the chair, sorry, so it does say that to assist with the delivery of the city centre spatial plan?
So we've referred to it as a bullet point and then we refer to it separately. I'm just curious why we've...
On page 29 of the new agenda, the first bullet point refers to it there, and so Councillor Fulton is asking why there's a breakout section on page 30.
Is it?
Yeah.
So through you, Madam Chair, I might be able to assist. So the descriptor on page 29 is just more broadly what the environment functions cover.
Yeah.
And then the detail under CBD enhancements is identifying the additional funding for that particular spatial plan.
And does that include a component of sort of looking at greening our city?
So through you, Madam Chair, yes, the spatial plan does look at the city centre in terms of greening.
Okay.
Councillor Noonan.
Thank you, Madam Chair, through you. I'm going back to the Nelson plan and the loan funding, and I know we're only looking at 1 year, but am I understanding that you're expecting to have to do additional loan funding in the following 2 years, or is it going to go beyond that?
So through the chair, it will be the addition, my understanding is the costs over the next 3 years are where the bulk of the expenditure would happen. We should be finished by that stage, going to plan, and then obviously then you start repaying the loan from there.
And would you anticipate it's a similar amount then over those?
Through the chair, it'll be between that 1 and 2 million over those next 2 years.
So we're intending to bring a report to the next Environment Committee meeting outlining those costs and how we will be, how we're proposing to deal with them, so that it can then be folded into the long-term plan. And that'll also be a look back as well on, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions on environment, including the Nelson Plan? Thank you. We'll move to page 31, 52 of the old, social. And we do have that new section on the refinery building. It was not included in the original, so it explains where we're at and how the feasibility study will inform the future design and activities there. Okay, we'll move to parks and active. Oh, sorry, Councillor Noonan.
I'm still skimming through lots of pages here. Thank you, yes. Just again.
You probably don't need to look at the laid out page because it's the exact same wording as the highlight one.
Awesome. I'll pocket that away. Thank you. Again, so the refinery building and the Stoke Memorial Hall, are we going to anticipate needing some unbudgeted funding? We obviously don't know what the amounts are going to be for the work, so are we going to be anticipating additional unbudgeted funding some stage over this coming year?
This afternoon there is a report to Community Services summarising that unbudgeted funding. Yes.
And so has that been anticipated in the money side of this, in the budget side? Has that gone into this before it's going out today? Presumably it's going out today.
Thank you. Through the chair, just to add that because those decisions came after the draft annual plan budget was confirmed, there may be some further information that we will need to bring through to be incorporated in the final version of the budget. So the report this afternoon, Community Services, covers that off. It discusses unbudgeted expenditure in the current financial year and indicates the areas where we will need to bring some further information. For example, reforecasting the Elmer Turner Library expenditure for next year in order to take care of Medfood Warehouse.
Right, so we need to be thinking, so right now today we probably can't deal with that, but between consultation with the public and when we come back and hearings and deliberations, we'll have those figures. So we might need to be thinking about what else we need to be cutting because we're not going to have a big enough piece of cloth. Yeah, I thought so. Thanks.
Yep, a standard annual plan process. If things need to come in, what needs to go out. So yes, that's the one. Okay, so parks and active recreation. And again, you'll see the addition of the wording for Kuata Park, and that's sort of the key change there. Minor amendments just to clarify whether funding is new or reduced. Councillor Noonan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So just referring to the Marina Hardstand improvements, that's a closed account, is it not? Right, so it's proposed that we borrow to put $950 into a closed account. Does that mean that the Marina boat? Hardstand, it's hardstand. So the marina users don't have to pay for that? How does the hardstand work against the marina closed account? Because this is our responsibility, isn't it?
So through the chair, it's within the marina closed account. It's not differentiated and it will be borrowings within the marina activity.
So.
And then, and the users will pay for it as part of, actually taking their boats out and using them. And they should be probably paying a component through their berth holder fees as well.
Okay, so just for my clarity, and I know I've been here a while, but I've never really got the marina in my head. So there's an account, but some of it is for marina users' benefit, and then other things are our responsibility, and it's all in one fund. Is that right? Because the hard stand is our responsibility, isn't it? Some of this are environment requirements.
So the hard stand, in fact, I think it's part of the conditions of the consent for the marina. If you don't have a hard stand to lift the boats out to clean them, I think you'd be struggling to run a marina. So no, it's all within the marina account, but it's how we recover costs to repay that marina account. Some will be through hard stand fees and some through berthage fees. And we'll have to do, review those fees in consultation with the Marina Advisory Group to make sure that we recover the extra cost of these loans. But we're having to do quite a bit of work on that hard stand and the filtration system and the resource consent.
Thank you, that's really helpful.
Councillor Laurie.
Thank you. On Kawata Park, I think there's a line missing, and when I read this, I can imagine some Nelsonians getting concerned that this was something that didn't actually, wasn't going to attract external funding, central government funding, which, as we all know, if it's going to happen, that will probably be required. So I wondered whether it might be possible to add a sentence that says at the end of the first paragraph, or at the end of the first block, a sentence that says it also has potential to attract significant Crown funding. Because I think that's an important part of the Kawata Park vision, and I think if we don't include that, that's going to freak some of our residents out.
I think we can certainly say government and external funding.
Yeah.
Because we know they're going certainly beyond that.
Sure. So it also has potential to attract significant government and other funding. Yep, is that all right?
Everyone in general agreement with that?
Well, I'm happy with that.
Yep.
Guaranteed, but that's the intent.
Yeah, and I think the wording,
Has a potential to.
yes.
Yeah. I just think it's important that anyone who reads this understands that.
Through the chair, we were just discussing whether it might be safer to say external funding rather than send a signal that might not be appropriate at this time around expecting government. It's just a thought.
Therefore, the word potential. Hence the word potential.
I think government, because government includes lottery and other funding sources, it doesn't necessarily just include PGF. I think what you wouldn't say is PGF, but yeah, government funding has multiple sources, so I think my personal opinion is government and external, and potential allows for that. So everyone generally happy? I'm going to go with nods of heads. Fantastic, thank you. Any other questions on parks and active recreation? Councillor Courtney.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. Through to Nikki, I think. Sea Sports Building. I see that we're using the word construction funding. And then we've got a figure in there of 365,000 in the annual plan. What are we intending to use that for? I mean, is that part of the construction funding, or is it, what are we doing?
Through the chair, sorry, over here, the 365,000 that's in there for the Sea Sports Building is for design. The following year would be construction, and would need to put that funding through the long-term plan.
Fine. We're not looking at repurposing the existing building?
Through the chair, we will be bringing a report to the Sports and Recreation Committee with recommendations on how to proceed with that building. There are two options. One's repurposing the existing building, and one is a new purpose-built building. And we're working with the users to confirm which is their preference.
Yes, thank you for that. And what caught my eye was the words construction funding. I thought, well, that might be going ahead of what we were planning or still considering.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions on sport and recreation? Okay, so we're now up to page 35 of the new, page 56 of the old, and I think that's a perfect opportunity to stop and have a little break. Councillors will have just seen that the Cheesecake Factory in the Richmond Mall has brought us in morning tea. It was their shout for us. Maybe they knew we were going to have a long day, so thank you very much to them. Sorry? Yeah, Cheesecake Factory. Yeah, I know.
How did they know I like cheesecake?
Thank you. So we'll stop and have a 15-minute break, and then we'll reconvene on the financials. Thank you. Okay, thank you, councillors. Okay, so before we move on to the financials, we just have a couple of minor wording changes from the parked discussions. I'm hoping they won't need to be overly wordsmithed or discussed. Again, we do have the minor amendments that will happen later, but on page 11 of the new agenda, under intensification, second to last paragraph, where it talks about increasing housing supply and residential intensification, just noting that we are needing to do this in a sustainable way, so that is wholly consistent with our other messaging, so that's just a minor change there and a minor addition there. And then on page, I will hand to Nikki MacDonald.
Thank you. Yes, through the chair, so in the climate change section, so somewhere in page 16, 17, the plan is to put a side box, and it would say planting trees is an effective strategy for combating climate change. Council plants thousands of trees every year through its operations in parks and reserves, transport and through Nelson Nature.
Okay, thank you. Yep, I'm seeing nods all round. Wonderful. Thank you very much for everyone who worked that through in their break. Okay, so we're now moving to page 35 of the new, 56 of the old. We'll start with just the first section, not including commercial differential. So we'll just start. Oh, actually, Nikki Harrison, would you like to speak to the financials at all first before I start going through? Sorry.
So yes, through the chair. I just wanted to highlight for councillors the section on page 35, which is keeping within the limits set in our financial strategy. And there's the balanced budget benchmark, which we don't hit this year. And I just want to make it just want to clarify that actually in the LTP we weren't planning to hit it anyway. So in this little graph that was in our long-term plan on page 189, because of the Waimea Dam grant of $5 million that was occurring on the 1st of July this next year, so within this financial year that we're consulting on, we were never planning to sort of hit that budget then. And that's really, as Mel was talking about before, the whole idea of loan funding OPEX. So unfortunately, because it's not our asset, the dam, it ends up being OPEX for us. And so if we didn't have the Waimea Dam, that ratio would be 101%. Or 101, and if we didn't loan fund the Nelson plan, it would be 102. You know, there's a bit of rounding in there, and I think you have to show whole numbers, but it's under 102. So I just wanted to sort of clarify that. And that obviously we're typically usually well above that benchmark.
Okay, thank you. So we'll now go for any questions up to but not including commercial differential. So in particular, anything to do with the benchmarks. Okay, thank you. I'll now move to the commercial differential. Councillor Noonan.
Going back to page 58, which says, what will my new rates be?
We're not there yet.
Oh, well, that was
commercial differential page. On both versions
sorry,
is before it. So commercial differential, any questions on that? Anything we need clarified? Councillor Skinner.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. There's a couple of questions I asked finance staff, which were very helpful, but it's good to get us an understanding of that. We've got the commercial differential, and on page 60 of our old document, we have a breakdown of the rates. And residential rates is ranging from an increase of 4.38% up to 5% for residential. And this is an example where the commercial differential is this year, if we do the same of decreasing it by 0.5% for commercial, it loads it up on the residential. So it's just basically a bit of clarification there. When we talk about 3.7% is the average rates increase, Joe Blogg's residential household, that wouldn't be correct. It'd be more like 4.7 etc. So I'm just putting it forward, but it might be an opportunity for two finance experts here to explain that.
So thank you. Through the chair, the average is always it's the increase in the rates required over that year across the whole of the rating base. And I think we're clarifying in that section that Councillor Noonan mentioned around how much will my rates be, that actually you're referring people to this table, as well as the fact that they can go onto the website and have a look at what their proposed rates increases will be. So as part of the long-term plan, we consulted on reducing that commercial differential down progressively over a 5-year period, and this is year 3 of that decision. So it does have an impact of shifting the rating burden between, the benefit of that was simply within the inner city and Stoke part of the commercial differential. So this really is moving that whole commercial differential down and moving some of that burden to the residential ratepayers. So happy to take further questions.
And councillors, if you also look at page 37 of your new papers, you will see that the section under what will my new rates be has been expanded so that people hopefully can better understand that it doesn't necessarily mean their rates increases 3.7%, but I'll give you a second just to read that. And then I'm happy to take questions on the commercial differential and the what will my new rates be sections. Councillor Skinner.
Thank you for that, and thank you for answering it. So my concern, and often quite rightly, residents are a bit surprised that their average property ends up being quite a bit more rates than the average that we see, and I know it's an average and you can be all sorts of variables in there. I've floated the idea that we put the average, the overall rates increase for residential is 4.5 or whatever it may be, and the rates increase for commercial is 2.8 or whatever it may be. That would be a more accurate way of putting it, because most ratepayers are residential and fewer are commercial. But I understand we have this differential, but sometimes it's a bit misleading for Joe Blogs, which we're all Joe Blogs around the table.
So through the chair, I mean, that's up to you if you want to include something like that. I mean, there is no average ratepayer because of the components of fixed and variable charges, which is why we include a consistent selection of sample properties, because the fixed components like the stormwater rate, the wastewater rate, the water rates, and how much water people use, there's no actual average, but we could calculate, an average rate increase between the two categories.
Because the 3.7% is the increase in rates income for the council as an overall package,
correct,
isn't it? Yes, so yeah, it isn't actually saying that your rates increase is 3.7 because there is no exact anyone, and so this is the increase in council's rate take. Councillor,
So if I can, and just a bit of quickly commentary there on my thoughts there, that in fact almost no residential property will be having a rate increase of 3.7. In fact, just about every residential property will have quite a bit higher than that in reality, apart from a few outliers. And the other thought is we've got fairly unpalatable rates increases from my viewpoint, and we've got this differential that we've decided to do each year of dropping the commercial by 0.5% and increasing the residential by correspondingly, so we're always getting this movement like so. And we're into the 3rd year, as rightly put, and we've also put in the wording that we would assess that annually, and this is where we are today. And my thoughts, to give you some feedback, Madam Chair, is that we hold off from that rates differential change, so we keep it the same as it was last year of the percentage of, which was at 24.1 for commercial, rather than dropping another 0.5%. That would have a beneficial effect on residential by dropping their rates increase by approximately 0.5%, which would be closer to that 3.7 rather than 4.5 or so forth. So I'm just giving you my thoughts at this stage, and this will probably come up in debate later.
Okay, I'll just, to Mrs Harrison, ask about the significance of that change.
So through the chair, it was in our LTP that we would do this for 5 years, and obviously this is the third year of the LTP and the third year of the cycle. So I was thinking it was more appropriate to review that policy as part of the LTP. However, from a significance perspective, we did say we would review it annually, as, you know, part of setting the rates process. So it would be something we would consult on as well. But you could consult on it as part of this annual plan.
And just the impact on if councillors, it's very late to try and redo all the numbers. I'm very aware of that. So impact of that versus wording.
So through the chair, it would require all the numbers to be reworked, all the rates to be reworked. It would probably add a week to 2 weeks to the, it would push the consultation out 1 to 2 weeks.
Okay, so I think we need to be cognizant of that as well. Councillor Noonan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Look, I mean, I'm sure that Financial Department would know the difference between, I think the question was, if we didn't have the differential this year, how much are we talking about? Because I imagine if watered down, it's really probably not going to make a lot of difference. Do you have those figures?
24.5.
It's 0.5% on the commercial, is it?
So through the chair, are you talking about what these differences to individual rates would be?
No, I guess what I'm saying is if we didn't do the percentage differential for commercial this year, how much of a difference would it make to the ratepayer? The general rate, the residential ratepayer. I'm thinking it might not be enough, and much to worry about is what I'm thinking.
So through the chair, it would just bring those rate increases back down towards the 3.7. It wouldn't necessarily make them 3.7. It would have to be all worked through because of the impact of all the fixed rates versus the variable.
So it's not as straightforward.
But so if you have a look at all those rate increases, I couldn't just tell you. I mean, it's a difference. It's a percentage difference. It wouldn't make a massive difference to those dollar increases.
Okay. So the second thing I want to ask, I've got 2 more questions. The second one is that I see that the average 2018 land value is 280,000. That seems really low to me. Is that right? It must be. Okay, well, I can find that quite surprising. Okay, and the email that I sent through earlier in the week was looking at the heading which says, what will my new rates be? I do agree that we need to separate somewhat the difference between the commercial rate and the residential rate, because I know that people are going to look at that and go, what will my rates be? They'll look at the 3.7 and then they'll get a few pages over and go, oh my goodness, that's not right. So I'm just wondering if we can go, maybe what will the new rates be? Because otherwise everybody's going, and then you can differentiate between the commercial and the residential. That the residential one will rise between 4 point whatever it is through to 4.99. I just find that a little bit misleading because I think people just hang on that heading.
So through the chair, I think that's a similar point to what Councillor Skinner was raising, that we should make it clearer within that section. If you would like, we will, again, those are only sample properties, so I can't tell you that those are the exact range of rate increases because there'll be some real outliers as well, but I could give an average for that whole sector. So an average increase for the residential.
So I probably think it would be best if we had commercial, because it's what will the new rates be, and the commercial is this range and the residential is this range.
No.
Yeah, but I think as Mrs Harrison said, it needs to be average, because you can't give a range because there will be sections with a lower land value,
yeah.
sections with a higher land value than what's stated. So if we say it's in this range, we're saying that's an absolute.
Okay.
Whereas, yeah, you need to just stick with an average, and you can say this is the council's rate increase take, here is your average for residential, here is your average for commercial.
So I think people struggle with that, so I'd like to think that they'll go away and work out a clearer message for simplicity.
Yep. Okay, thank you. Councillor McGurk.
Yeah, got the answers I needed.
Thank you. Councillor Laura.
Thank you. Just picking up on Councillor Noonan's question about the land values, am I right in thinking that's through the chair because those land values are based on the 2018 valuation still?
Through the chair, yes.
Yeah.
It's the most recent, we get it done every 3 years and that's the most recent, and it's already out of date.
There you go. That's why.
Yep, and that's done independently from council, those valuation sets. Okay, so I'm going to go with nods of heads again. Everyone generally happy with just some clarification around average residential increases, average commercial, overarching increase in rate take? Okay, thank you. Is everyone happy with wording to be added to that section, clarifying what the average residential increase is, average commercial, and the council's increase in rate take?
That's my request exactly, so
Yeah, but I'm just making sure everyone's happy.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Right, so we will go back to the agenda now, to the funding impact statement. So we're on page 63 of the agenda. We have generally already covered up to page 69, but I will say if there are any further questions on general rates, UAGC, differentials, the stormwater and flood protection charge and targeted rates for clean, heat, warm homes. So that's pages 63 through 69, if anyone has any questions. I'll give you a moment to look at your notes. Councillor Noonan.
Thank you. I've just got a note here that on page 69 regarding the charge for stormwater and flood protection charge going up, but we're taking out so many millions of work. So I just wonder how we can collect 1.7 million of flood protections coming out. How can we collect more money when we're not doing more work?
So through the chair, good question. The comparison of what we're taking out is actually to the LTP. The rate increases to the annual plan. So that's sort of comparing two different columns. But in terms of the main drivers of the stormwater and flood protection rate, it really is around OPEX. So within that activity, we've got increased depreciation, we've got increased staff costs because we've put more staffing within that stormwater and flood protection area. And I think those are the main two drivers of that. So yeah, and obviously you get a flow-on impact of previous capital expenditure. So those are the main drivers for why that particular targeted rate has increased.
Okay, thank you. We will go to pages 70 through 74.
Madam Deputy, just before we move off financials and rates, I want to give you notice that I am going to move a motion in discussion and debate along the lines that Council has a nil rate increase for the 2021 year in recognition of the fragile world circumstances. So I just give you notice of that. I'm moving a notice of motion.
Okay, so are you...
A motion.
Okay, thank you. So with that, so that's probably ballpark around $3 million reduction. So will you also be presenting suggestions for the council on how we reduce the budget by $3 million?
I I'm not going to debate it with you now.
No, I was just asking if you had other information you were going to present
I'm
or
going to
table.
suggest an avenue that we pursue.
Right, okay. Well, he's not putting it yet, so he's just letting me know. Okay, so we are still on the financials though, pages 70 through 74. Do we have any questions on those pages? It's the targeted rate for solar hot water systems, wastewater charge, water rates, payments, penalties and discounts. Okay, thank you. We'll move to page 75, which is the commercial wastewater charge, trade waste charges. Okay, moving to page 77, annual plan disclosure. Now, this is primarily the benchmarks, which we did discuss earlier, so I'm possibly going to assume we have no further questions on the benchmarks. Great, okay, and so now we've got pages 84 through to 89, which is the summary of CapEx over 100,000. Councillor Noonan.
Page 83 talks about, Statistics New Zealand uses the stats for benchmarking, and we are on the lower or slower growth, and I know we can't do anything about it. I just wanted to make the point that that is actually having an impact on us, isn't it? So the staff might want to just explain that if we were on a higher growth trajectory and accepted by Statistics New Zealand that we are, what would the difference be for us?
So through the chair, my understanding is if we were on a higher growth projection in terms of this benchmark, we would have a higher benchmark. And we're miles below that benchmark anyway, so it wouldn't actually have any impact on us. So the benchmark would actually move. So on higher growth councils, my understanding is that their benchmark is that they have to be, borrowing costs is less than 15% of their planned revenue, whereas because we're on a lower trajectory, we have to be under 10%, but we're at 2.9, I think. So we're well under 10%, so it wouldn't have any impact.
Thank you. That did make me wonder. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any questions, pages 84 through to 89? Just give a moment. Councillor Skinner.
Page 86, on the chart, projects, partway down, community housing renewals. I know in the annual plan in the past we've put 296,000 in our long term. In this annual plan we've got nothing there. Do we need something there? I know we've had a bit of a workshop on that, but
so through the chair, the assumption within the annual plan is that community housing will be sold.
do we need to be a little bit more detailed on that for the community?
Well, I guess at this stage we have no further information otherwise, and negotiations are happening, and so probably that is still the correct assumption.
So from my perspective, just of prudence, many things we don't know how long a piece of string is, and best intentions, would it be prudent for us to put some money in there for whatever an outcome may be?
Through the chair, we actually do discuss this issue on what is page 12 of the document, not the agenda, and we wouldn't put in items and collect rates for them when we didn't believe we were going to actually need that money.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Noonan.
I didn't have my hand up, but I will say that hopefully we might, if anything happens between now and when we do our debate, we might have more information, and we have got the opportunity, if we had to put some money in at that point, I imagine.
Yes, so we're usually anticipate lots of changes as we get more information on a number of areas throughout the plan, and so everything will be updated at that time of deliberations.
Thank you.
Okay, anything further up to page 89 inclusive? Okay, we'll move to page 90.
Madam Chair, just going back to page 85 in the Alma-Turner Library, can you be reminded whether that had the new figures in there, taking out or are we going to be changing that when we know how much that demolition is going to cost? That will change. Okay, that's fine, thank you.
Yep. Okay, pages 90, page 90. Councillor McGurk.
Yeah, thank you, and through you, Madam Chair, to Ms Harrison. I'm just wondering, in light of the current events, with the dividends and interest rates, are the figures you've got there, are you reasonably confident that they're for the annual plan? I'm looking at the, where is it? Where is it?
So through the chair, obviously, so we take dividends from the port, the airport and NELMAC, and I've recently gone through and had another look at those and spoken directly to the port. There are some risks around those dividend flows, but I mean, in terms of interest rates, we will actually hopefully pick up more of a benefit on that side of on the expenditure side, if rates do actually drop.
So, at the moment is that if the interest rates continue to track down, the benefits.
Yeah.
Okay, then.
So we're a net borrower, so we benefit from lower interest rates, and so we'll probably pick up more there than any risk around dividends or interest income.
Okay, thank you. Page 91 and 92. Okay, thank you. We'll move to the Statement of Financial Position and Cash Flow Statement, page 93, 94. Okay, I'm moving through all of the funding impact statements: transport, water, wastewater, stormwater, flood protection, solid waste, all of the infrastructure related ones. So that takes us through to page 106. Environmental management, page 107 and 8. Social, page 109. Parks and active recreation, 111. Economic and corporate, 113 through to 116. And finally, 117, the financial reserves estimates. And I think there was a typo on the climate change line. Is that correct?
Yes, so through the chair, there was a typo on the climate change reserve in terms of what was spent. Should have been 182,500 to align with the consultation document, and the closing balance is 197,500.
Thank you. Okay.
I'm going back to page 110, which I'm not familiar with the extra costs at Brook Camp, and we haven't had a report on that. Is there any information on that?
Sorry, can you clarify your question? I didn't quite hear it.
There is a commentary that there's payments to staff and suppliers have increased by 1.9 million, excuse me for reading, but second paragraph. This increase includes an increase in the allocation of staff costs as well as increased security costs, contractor costs at the Brook Camp. And I'm not familiar with any information regarding that. Is that a large amount?
Thank you. Through the chair, I think this has been covered in previous reports to the committee regarding costs at the Brook Campground. I think the paragraph refers not only to the Brook. There is reference there to NCMA, but certainly costs at the Brook Campground have risen, and it's one of the reasons why we are bringing a report to Sport and Rec, I think in April, regarding future management options. There is an issue around security, and as you probably recall, the staffing does rely on a contract, accessing contractors through NELMAC, and the cost of that model is becoming very expensive, especially given the revenue coming in. Thank you.
Thanks for clarifying that.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so if there's no further questions, we'll go to the... Oh, sorry, Councillor Fulton.
I just have a question or a comment referring to this document here in terms of the images.
Oh, no, we're not doing that now.
So when do we have an opportunity to...
You can give feedback after.
I can give feedback on the images after? That's all good? Okay, good. Thank you. I'm just...
So we only get to... We're on the words only. So, yep. That's a draft layout, and so, yep, you can just talk directly to the staff afterwards. Okay, so we're on page 17, and we've got the resolutions. We're just about to have the resolutions. And you'll see that resolution number 3 has been amended to reflect that we are talking about the tabled document and the amendments that we discussed and undertook during this meeting, the ones we all nodded our heads over. And then, of course, there is the minor amendments, if anyone spots any other typos or other things, that will get approved through number 4. So Councillor Sanson is happy to move that resolution, and Councillor McGurk is seconding. So
I would like to move an amendment to the recommendation there too, and it is in the hands of our administration there. And I move that Council adopts a nil rate increase for the 2021 years in recognition of the fragile world circumstances. Now, I do that because things are incredibly vulnerable at the moment. We must recognise that, and we must act responsibly and acknowledge at this point, when doing our annual plan, that these are the circumstances. Recognise that the world is in the midst of a serious health crisis, on the brink, I'll say on the brink, of a financial crisis, and even, and I'm sad to say this, even the possibilities of a recession worldwide. Countries like Italy are shutting down. Qantas Airways have announced this week that they are grounding 30 of their planes. Now just imagine if Air New Zealand did something similar on a smaller scale. The world economy is faltering, no question about that, and the effects are starting to be felt here in New Zealand and in Nelson. And I think this is a time for us to show restraint and leadership. And I spent a considerable amount of time yesterday communicating with people all around the Nelson region and asking them in confidence what they felt, what the situation was, and the feedback was, Mel, something is happening. That was the overall feedback, something is happening. They said there's an easing back of forward orders in some businesses. And in some areas, there's a definite sign that customers are in retreat. And one businesswoman put it best of all. She said, Mel, things are starting to get the wobbles. Things are starting to get the wobbles. So I say we need to act in this situation. We need to show leadership. We need to act quickly. This is the key. In these situations, we just can't go blindly on and pretend that nothing is happening in the world, when it is. And when it impacts Nelson, it's going to impact us very, very hard indeed. We are vulnerable, as I said, right at the beginning, with our port at the front line of the coronavirus, and I didn't want to use that word today if I could avoid it. The health crisis. Our major industries are also feeling the wobbles. So are our larger businesses, medium and small, right across the board. And so we've got to be mindful of this, and therefore I move my recommendation, my amendment. Because we're going to be impacted, and we've got to be ready for it, and there could be job losses, tourism could be impacted. And so my answer is that we recognise it now, and this is the time to do it. Madam Deputy Mayor, you ask, I have a great deal of confidence in our Chief Executive and our senior management team. In times of crisis, I say we delegate this responsibility. You come up with a figure that we'd have to cut back. But in times of crisis, I delegate this responsibility to them. And we accept what they come down with. We accept that. And we move on. Because people are concerned out in the community. They really are. They see their jobs under threat. Retailers do. Industry, right across the board. And so we have to be recognising this, cognisant of it, and act quickly. That is the key. So I'm happy to move my amendment.
Okay, thank you. The CE may wish to comment, but I will just start with saying we can't abdicate our responsibilities. It is perhaps easy to say we could delegate that to our staff, but that's actually the very purpose that councillors and a council is here. That is our governance role, and we can't abdicate or delegate that to them. So that is our responsibility. So if we wish to remove $3 million from the budget, then give or take, won't be less than that, then they are decisions that we need to make. Alternatively, of course, we can put the document out for consultation and hear from all of the community about what they would like to see removed to enable that lesser rate increase. I always welcome hearing all of the community's voice, and this is the purpose. I think it's a pity that central government doesn't have some of the obligations that local government has around consultation, actually, and I think it's really good to be able to go out there and listen, not talk to them, but listen to the community, but having something to have that give and take with is actually sort of part of that valuable discussion. But Councillor Courtney has moved an amendment. Is there?
Can we check with a brief adjournment? Because there's quite some big to take in there. What can be done and what can be done as regards to it? Can we have like a 3-minute adjournment?
Well, is there
Does he have a seconder?
Yeah, well, I want to see if there's a seconder.
Or can we have a 3-minute adjournment before seeking a second? Because this is quite a major decision we're making, and there's some quite major.
Yeah,
only if there's a seconder.
Yeah, I mean, we know it will have legal implications because we won't meet our deadlines for putting the plan out. So it will have significant legal implications. We can't delegate it to the staff.
Well, more of a reason for us to prudently just have to give us 2 minutes.
Madam Chair, if Councillor Skinner wants to continue the discussion, he should second the amendment.
Yeah. And then we'll debate it.
Well, this is a chance for some prudence. If we have 2 minutes because that's quite an asking, and for us just to digest that, because this has come out of the blue. There was no precursor to this. But if we give us 2 minutes, it gives us better decision making, and it might be in your benefit, Madam Chair.
You have to have a second. I think you have to have a
Well,
second.
we can adjourn. The chair can choose to adjourn any time, but I'm just making a request there, up to the chair, yea or no.
So is there someone you wish to seek information from?
Councillor Courtney and staff.
You don't have to vote for it. It's a pro forma.
One question I will just have potentially of the CE or Mrs. Birch is, just want to check whether this is classified as an amendment or a significant derivation from the existing resolutions as they stand, and so therefore cannot be classified as an amendment, but could only be put if the substantive resolutions fail. I'll have an adjournment for a couple of minutes. Okay, thank you, councillors. Okay, so Mary or Pat, just in response to my question, just checking on the status of the amendment.
Through you, Madam Chair, I can confirm that as far as the technicalities of this with regards to standing orders, this is an amendment that can be placed. It is not a direct negative, so can be placed as long as it has a seconder.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so do we have a seconder for the resolution, for the amendment? Okay, so it lapses for want of a seconder. Okay, so we have the resolutions have been moved and seconded. We're now open to debate. Thank you, Councillor Laurie.
Sorry, Madam Chair, I was just getting ready to debate the amendment, and I was hoping that someone would second it so we could debate it. I considered doing that myself, but then I decided against it, so yeah, nothing to contribute at this point, unfortunately. I was really looking forward to it though, Mel.
Okay, any other debate on the resolutions that are up? Councillor Noonan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm supporting this to go out to the community for their feedback. I think I need to be pretty relaxed about the format because I would encourage the public to have a really good look at the document, and people that haven't submitted before, as I always say, have a go and submit, because we like new people submitting. I think it would be irresponsible of us, with respect to Councillor Courtney, to go with a nil increase. I think we have obligations as building owners in that one area. We have to do something, so we're going to have to increase our rates because we're going to have to do some work. We have essential work that must be done, and a nil increase is not going to do it. So going back to the original, I'll be short. I'm approving it going out.
Thank you. Councillor Fulton.
Yes, thank you, through the chair. So, look, I'm actually really excited about this year's annual plan. I think it's well done to the staff, great work. I think a few weeks ago when we went through our workshop processes, I was a little worried that we weren't going to quite get there, but I think that for me, the vision work which we did getting on for 3 years ago now, and that scene setting, and then looking at our 4 priorities and how we've moved and evolved into this new council into creating 3 focuses for the new triennium. I think it's actually really exciting to see that vision work laid out. I love this page here, and I think it's exciting to see that, plus start to see some of the actions that are occurring, so that particularly actions around the climate change lens. So I'm excited about the 1-year trial on food waste, collecting food waste and composting that, and seeing if we can then take that through the long-term plan and upscale that. I'm very excited about that progressing. It's been a priority for me for many years, so finally we're making progress in the right direction, and some of these major pieces of work, major changes of how we've done things, but it is definitely heading in the right direction. I think we're seeing that happening with our modal shift and creating a sustainable transport future, and also housing has been a priority for some of us for many, many years, and finally we have these opportunities to support our community to find sustainable and affordable options, and how we intensify our urban spaces in our brownfield existing housing is a really key part of how this city will look and feel into the future. That housing has an intergenerational effect in terms of climate, so you build a house to last for 50 years, hopefully longer, and getting that right is key to, it's not just about affordability, it's not just about intensification, it's around that sustainability and ensuring that the building materials we use last a long time and can be deconstructed, as well as used into the future. So I'm very excited about the way we're heading, and I want to thank the staff for supporting us and have very much enjoyed this process over the last couple of months. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Fulton. Councillor Rainey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm not sure whether I can say that I was excited by an annual plan, although I do think this draft document that we have here in front of us today looks really great, and I think that the range of measures and activities and things that we are putting up for consultation is great. I do think that those who would suggest that now's the time to retreat because of the issues that are heightened, or we were faced with huge worldwide issues when we met as new council last year to set our priorities or our focus. And even though we have a heightened issues, I guess you could say, facing it at the moment, I don't think this is the time to retreat. I think this is the time for a council to show leadership and to invest in and to show how we would potentially invest in the community. It is really important that we recall some words that Kerry Marshall said many years ago around this council table, and when he pointed out that in the time of the Great Recession, more theatres were built in America during the 1930s than in any other time in history. That was the time when real leadership invests in communities. Although using the analogy of building more theatres perhaps wasn't the right thing to use. I do think we have a role to play in setting a tone of optimism in this city, especially for our young people. And I know that this annual plan, this draft annual plan document, is going to go a long way towards achieving that.
Thank you. Councillor Brand.
Okay, sorry, we are in debate, aren't we?
Yes.
Yep, cool. Okay, thank you. So I'm about to just go. Okay. So I appreciate the amount of work that's gone into the preparation of this annual plan and in trying to keep the rate increase down. However, this still doesn't sit well with me. As we discussed and explained earlier, that the 3.7% average is the council take, and any and all rate increases really does put our ratepayers under a huge strain to meet their everyday living costs. Most of the people in our region don't receive an annual pay increase and are having to absorb the natural increase in the cost of living every year. How do our quiet majority do that? Well, having worked in the health and social service sector for over 25 years, I can tell you they do it by not buying food for 7 days and will miss 2 meals a week, not because they are following the latest fad in a diet to lose weight, but by necessity. By not going to the GP or by picking up their prescriptions, by not heating their home as we're heading into winter. And in our current health environment, these are not good choices. Yet they take the attitude, oh well, we just have to suck it up, buttercup, let's get on with it. And they do. So therefore, I would encourage that we continue to look at how we can reduce this percentage increase, and if this goes out to the community as is, then I really do encourage individuals, groups and other parties to feed in so the priorities can be set, and as May is the final consideration that we would have, we will have time to reflect how the economy is responding to the latest health impact on our region, because we are very vulnerable and our people in this region who work 3, 4, maybe 5 part-time jobs because they cannot get full-time work in our area due to the type of nature, that will give us the opportunity to really focus on what is our priorities. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Skinner.
Thank you. Thank you for the hard work the staff and the CEO have done, because I know in the past and present, us as a council have difficulty taking things out, and the good staff go in there prudently and take stuff that we can remove out of there. I'm disappointed in the amount of the rates increase. It's beyond what we originally planned in the LTP. I'm also a bit concerned, disappointed in the amount we've reduced our infrastructure spend. I acknowledge the wisdom of only putting in there what you can do in a given year, and some of those changes and some of those things move around, but we've reduced that by getting close to $5 million in spend there. The other thing there, you can see the impact of differential. So I'm glad to hear that we're going to put a 2 averages in there, one for residential average increase, which is going to be more like 4.5% rather than 3.7%, which will give a more realistic for Joe Bloggs. But one of our criteria of this council is sustainability. It's not sustainable to continue to increase rates 2, 3, 4, 5% year on year. That accumulates greater than the income increases is for those who are paying it. There are only so many daylight hours in a week to work to earn that extra. So that extra $50 or extra $150 on the rates, that is a number of hours a ratepayer needs to be working to earn that, to displace that. We've taken historically on a lot of trade decisions we've made in the past, and as much as I've lots of ideas and in the past where we can reduce our rates, some of those things are tied into 5-10 year funding decisions that we've made. I would like to see the differential put on hold, so it's the same as it was last year, rather than another further 5% added on top of residential and 5% taken off commercial. But I'm glad to see that will be highlighted in what goes out to the public, so we'll get some feedback on the public on that. But I think that would make life a lot easier, just cutting that back by 0.5%. I've seen a lot of frustration with this council. I've been open to the climate declaration, but so far I've seen a lot of talk and less doing. There's going to be ongoing costs with this Denmark pen pals and fanfare, as I put it. I have concerns with that, and that we've probably concentrated on us trying to be scientists, and we talked about imaginary playgrounds before. I sometimes wonder if we're trying to be imaginary scientists at this table. None of us are scientists at this table, and I agree with the things like adding of trees, etc., but just focusing on one dimension to improve our climate won't work. There's got to be less talk and more doing. I asked council around the table, make advantage, and the public take advantage of the 10 trees that the council kindly give out. You just go down to the reception here and ask for 10 trees. I've done that, and there's no reason why we can't do it on an individual basis rather than talking about numbers of trees that we're going to put in. But there's a lot more than trees to achieve those sorts of goals without the expenditure that we're talking about. So yes, I don't support this rate increase, which will be around about 4.5% for residential. I do support that we go out to public on what we've got in here, and an opportunity for public to give a bit of feedback on that. But we do need to be far tighter on our shopping list. And I do have concerns once again about how cutting on our capital and infrastructure. But once again, we can only do what we can staff. So I do compliment on us taking on a bit more spending on staff, and it has shown, especially as a chair, that has shown great advantages, and hopefully it will flow into the next year and what we're able to do more efficiently and performance-wise. But thank you, Chair, for chairing this committee meeting. It's gone very well, and it's a big decision we're making today, nothing we take lightly, and I hope the public understand that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor O'Neill-Stevens.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to acknowledge what Councillors Brand and Skinner have said around the reality for our lowest income communities and the impact that these rates increases have. And I'd also like to acknowledge what Councillor Rainey said, that investment is key, and especially, as Councillor Courtney raised earlier, in these trying times. And it's our job sitting around the table to reconcile these two things, and it is a difficult task at times. What I think this annual plan delivers is a balance of both worlds. It is not perfect, but local government is a world of practicalities, not imagination playgrounds. We've struck, I think, and staff have done a fantastic job to both address our core responsibilities and investments, whilst also striving to be what we must be, which is aspirational and proactive on a number of key issues, particularly our housing crisis and climate change, without forgetting our core maintenance and investments that have to go on alongside all of that. And so whilst we can continue to nitpick or hold burdens for these things that don't quite meet our dream world, I think if we take a look from, this is a document that is thus far addressing the key concerns and doing it well. And I look forward to seeing what the community has to say, and I'm sure we'll be taking in their feedback. But as it stands, we've got a great foundation to work from.
Thank you. Councillor Laurie.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So one of the things I worry about when we do this is we produce a good-looking publication that most of us will feel good about, but what I often worry about is whether or not anyone else reads it. And so I really hope that people out there do pick it up or check it out online and see what we're planning for the next year. I want to put out a shout out to all those groups that we don't regularly hear from in this process. Democracy is about more than just being on the electoral roll and voting every 3 years. It's another word for participation. And the annual plan process is an opportunity for all our citizens to participate in democracy. And I think the more democracy and the more participation we can get around this place, the better. So I would love to hear from members of our former refugee community. I'd love to see the kids from the school strike for climate in here. I'd like to hear from all sorts of groups, that schools, for example, that we don't typically hear from. It's great to get the regular contributors in this chamber as we do the annual plan process, but it would be wonderful to hear from more Nelsonians. Just echoing Councillor Rainey's point about leadership in times of crisis, I think it is very important that we are aware of the risks that our communities face, but I also think it's really important that we do not panic, and that we keep our eyes on where we're heading, and that we keep going there together. And I don't want to get back into that amendment particularly, or proposed amendment, but yeah, we do. We have a responsibility to keep things going forward and to give people confidence that we know what we're doing and we know where we're heading.
Okay, thank you. You have already spoken. Well, it's not question. You have spoken.
I just wanted to say that I just got the impression that we want it to go out to the community, but we're not happy with the percentage.
Yeah, I think that's been stated. Yeah, thank you. Okay, any further councillors before I put the resolutions? Okay, so an annual plan is always a problematic document, to be honest. It is one slice out of a 10-year plan, but in reality it is much more than that. It is just one slice in our community, it's like a day in the life. And we know that there will still be changes that come through. As we get more information. A day is, they always say a day is a long time in politics. Well, we've got 2 months before we sign this off. So we know a lot of things will change. We'll get a lot of new information through. We know that council can't retreat because we know there are things the community needs. We know the community needs affordable housing. We know the community needs social housing. So it is always this incredible tension and the balance of trying to do the work, drive changes, deliver on needs, support the economy and local businesses, all while doing it in a, environmentally sustainable and financially sustainable manner. There isn't a government or local government around the world that has hit that balance perfectly. But we all try our best, and part of that will be the listening to the community. Community groups are good submitters for annual plans and long-term plans, and while a lot of individuals may feel they don't have a voice, through groups like Nelson Tasman, Multicultural Nelson Tasman, we get to hear the voices of people that may not feel they have a voice. And so, as Councillor Laurie said, it is great to have those groups being able to represent people in our community, so we get to hear that cross-section. I think that's probably all I need to say. We just need to be clear about what we have and haven't signed up to. There was comments about we have signed up for reciprocal trips back and forward to Denmark. We did not sign up to that. Some delegates from Denmark are planning to come out in the future. That's the end. The sharing of information is a online email process. Beyond that, there has been no further sign up to anything other than that. And I think sharing of information is key. We don't hold all of the information. We don't have all of the expertise here, but what we have here is leadership. What we have here is community leadership and the ability to bring people together and bring people into a room. That's exactly what we did with Minister Twyford and O'Connor's visit the other day. They were coming down to the region, we were able to bring people together into a room, and that's a great role that we provide as a council. Anyway, that being said, the resolutions as amended, number 3, you'll see there. I'm going to put the resolutions. All those in favour? Aye. Against? It's carried. Thank you very much. Don't run. We're going to move to go into committee. Anyone? Public? We'll need to move. Yep, public excluded. Okay, move Councillor Skinner, second Councillor Noonan. All those in favour? Aye. Against? That's carried. Thank you. We'll just wait a second. We're only going to public excluded for about 30 seconds.